Good morning, Chairman Roy, Chairman Matsey, Representative Schweier, and members of the House Consumer Affairs Committee. My name is Chad Forcey, and I am the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Conservative Energy Forum. The Pennsylvania Conservative Energy Forum, or PENSEF, is a 501c3 nonprofit educational foundation committed to clean and renewable energy and energy diversity in the Commonwealth. And we are led by a board and leadership council of prominent Pennsylvania conservative leaders from government, industry, and education. This includes folks like former Lieutenant Governor Jim Colley, former Reagan administration Navy Secretary and 9/11 Commission member Dr. John Lehman, former State Representative Tom Stevenson, and many others. PENSEF believes that renewables like solar, wind, and biomass should be included in our proud Pennsylvania all-of-the-above energy sector. For PENSEF, all of the above means that renewables deserve full access to markets in addition to other significant sources like natural gas, nuclear, and coal. The Commonwealth leads our nation in domestically produced energy exports. Next-generation solar technologies bring the promise of even greater economic expansion to our strong and diverse energy portfolio. Clean and renewable energy jobs now account for the greatest portion of job growth in this sector, as illustrated in the 2019 E2 Clean Jobs Pennsylvania report. The report found that Pennsylvania's clean energy jobs now stand at more than 90,000 and are growing at an annual rate of 6%, which is a growth rate 5 times the overall job growth in Pennsylvania pre-pandemic. As we emerge from the ravages of the pandemic, the need for economic recovery is paramount. In the field of solar, legislation that opens markets to create more jobs and spur new investments represents a real win for Pennsylvania. House Bill 531 would accomplish these goals through the creation of a new community solar marketplace in the Commonwealth. House Bill 531. As conservatives, we believe in open markets, less red tape, and greater economic freedom. House Bill 531 accomplishes these goals in the spirit of free market capitalism, which we cherish. We thank State Representative Aaron Coffer and State Representative Donna Bullock, plus the more than 80 additional House members, many of whom are on this committee, who co-sponsored the legislation for the introduction of community solar in Pennsylvania. House Bill 531 would allow the installation of solar projects by multiple residents, farmers, or business owners on a single property. By extending this right to community solar organizations, House Bill 531 provides far greater numbers of PA citizens the opportunity to go solar. As PENSEF Leadership Council member, former Reagan administration Navy Secretary and 9/11 Commission member Dr. John Lehman recently wrote in the Patriot News, the advantages of allowing groups of citizens to come together and complete a new solar project are many. It would be much easier to install solar arrays. Currently, the rule in Pennsylvania is one property, one solar project, but the cost is often too high for individual farmers or residents to develop a project on their own. Under the legislation, however, individuals could band together to finance each project. So, in the context of farming, if one farmer has a ridgeline otherwise unusable for growing crops, he or she could form a community solar organization with a group of neighboring farmers. Collectively, they could get a loan for development and invest in their future as farmers. This example can be applied proportionally in the business and residential property contexts. By increasing access and leverage for development, House Bill 531 democratizes the ability to go solar for all of our Pennsylvania citizens. This legislation is the necessary next step in opening new markets for electricity generation in Pennsylvania. If this legislation is not passed in 2020, we will keep the community solar market closed, and homegrown solar generation will remain out of reach for many Pennsylvanians. As 22 other states have found, opening these markets is good for jobs and the economy. So one way to make solar far more practical is to cut the red tape and open the door for new investors. We understand that upwards of $2 billion in new investments await the passage of this bill in 2020. Our solar industry is an American industry. supplied by American companies that produce American electricity. At least 25 companies produce solar panels in the United States, and more production is in the works from these and other American entrepreneurs. ConsAffairs supports American solar manufacturing, installation, and expansion. And it is popular with all voters. Our polling, conducted by respected Republican pollster Glenn Bolger, has consistently found that support for solar at the national level is strong across all political and demographic groups, from 74 to 76% on average. Our recent Pennsylvania numbers are even stronger, with 81% in favor of community solar, including more than 60% of Republican voters. Additionally, I'm excited that, if passed, House Bill 531 will bring a new energy market online without any new taxes or any new state expenditures. This bill, in other words, doesn't cost the Commonwealth a dime, but it will generate significant economic growth. I would be remiss if I did not mention the crisis in Pennsylvania agriculture, which was discussed prior to the pandemic and has only worsened since then. Millions of gallons of milk have been dumped due to the breakdown of supply lines. Dairy farmers in Pennsylvania have borne the brunt of this new economic reality, but farms in every major commodity across Pennsylvania have been eligible for emergency federal assistance, totaling more than $123 million since February. There is no question that House Bill 531 would help farmers to diversify their profits and productivity and take advantage of the unused open space on hillsides, on the roofs of barns, chicken houses, and other structures. On the land itself, farmers can take advantage of temporary development enhancements, and solar panels are not permanent, by the way. Crops such as soybeans, pollinator-friendly crops, and even beehives can flourish underneath solar panels. So the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau has endorsed House Bill 531. Their 2019 Senate testimony on this subject states, "We can see agriculture playing a key role in the development of community solar projects. Community solar would allow multiple landowners to pay for and receive credit from a group project. We believe that Pennsylvania should open the door for community solar energy generation and give landowners the ability to participate in these projects if they so choose. We are calling on lawmakers to pass House Bill 531 so that more solar energy projects can get off the ground in Pennsylvania." I'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to submit testimony on this important community solar legislation. To restate, ConsAffairs strongly supports the passage of House Bill 531. I'll be happy to respond to any questions from members of the committee, and I can also be reached at the email address listed here, which is chad.forcey@pensaff.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. And again, we're going to wait till after all three testifiers testify for the questions. Our final testifier is Lauren Burnsdale from the Community Energy. And, okay, Lauren is going to be with us electronically, so hopefully this works out. I can see you. Hopefully we will be able to hear you. Go ahead when you're ready, Lauren.
Great, thank you. Just a quick test. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see you. So.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you, Chairman Rowe and members of the House Consumer Affairs Committee. Thank you for allowing Community Energy the opportunity to submit written and oral testimony in favor of House Bill 531. Community Energy is a 25-year Pennsylvania-based company headquartered in Radnor. We specialize in developing wind and solar at scale across the country. Today, Pennsylvanians are not able to participate in the community solar market without legislative action to open the market and allow access to community solar. House Bill 531 removes the red tape by enabling Pennsylvanians to participate in the community solar market through subscriptions to projects built in Pennsylvania. This new market will create the stability the industry needs to make investments in Pennsylvania now, bringing more jobs in every county and great economic stability to hardworking farming communities. Solar produces more jobs per unit of electricity than any other source of generation, and by a wide margin. Solar jobs are good paying jobs, including electricians, surveyors, design and civil engineering, real estate, geotechnical and material procurement, distribution, construction, and operation and maintenance. And solar works throughout the state, from Erie to Pittsburgh to Scranton and to Philadelphia. There's immense solar electric generation potential in Pennsylvania, and no county is left out, which is very unique. Hundreds of your constituents and farming communities throughout the Commonwealth have recognized that solar and farming go hand in hand. And during times of economic hardship in our state, a wide array of farmers have already decided to lease a small portion of their land to farm the sun in exchange for a steady income and good stewardship of the farmland by the solar projects. Solar is one of the best tools we have for preserving farmland under development pressure. A solar project can pay 3 to 5 times the annual income from farming, and it's guaranteed for the life of the project. And it allows the farmland to stay within the family for future generations. We install posts and racking with minimal grading, without removing topsoil and without concrete foundations. Essentially, solar is installed the same way you put in a fence. You drive the piles into the ground and you can pull them back out. Cover crops like deep-rooted fescue grass and more recently pollinator-friendly cover crops also improve the organic content of the soil year by year as that land lays fallow. So at the end of the life of the project, it's improved farmland for that farmer. At the end of the 25-year lease, backed by a decommissioning bond, a farmer can count on the removal of the solar equipment right down to pulling those posts out of the ground, and it's improved farmland for the next generation. That's crucial for farmers, farm families, and all of us who depend on their crops and our energy. Pennsylvania is behind on solar energy. There are 40 states that have at least one community solar facility online, and 20 states plus the District of Columbia that have passed legislation to enable community solar projects, creating investment opportunities in their state or districts. Community solar projects, like Leslie said, are larger than typical rooftop setups, but they're smaller than the utility scale installations. They connect directly into the distribution grid and are considered behind the meter projects. As such, the economic drivers and benefits of community solar projects differ from the other market sectors, but provide a huge benefit to the state. Community solar is not new, but it is a unique market that Pennsylvania has an opportunity to benefit from. As an industry, we have had many conversations with your committee members about these benefits and have been focused on finding workable solutions that open the market and meets the needs of Pennsylvania. As such, Representative Coffer has worked tirelessly in the creation of House Bill 531 to find a solution that builds a bridge for immediate investment in the Commonwealth, while also looking to find long-term market solutions. There are many good examples of effective community solar markets around the country. In 2019, Illinois' ComEd, a sister company to PECO, developed a smart inverter service payment system that they tout as the most innovative market mechanism for community solar and EDCs. In 2014, Minnesota became the first state to adopt a value of solar policy. Some of the key components of that are based on avoiding the need to build additional power plant capacity to meet peak energy, reducing wear and tear on the electric grid, including power lines, substations, and power plants, and purchasing energy from carbon-reducing sources. One of the key values of community solar facilities are the avoided capacity transmission and distribution investments as a result of adding a community solar project to the grid. When a community solar facility is connected to the distribution grid, a developer is required to pay any necessary and reasonable upgrade costs associated with allowing that facility to connect. And as such, the community solar facilities come online and they reduce the local stress of the system by meeting demand closer to the source. Expanding distributed solar electric generation can defer and eliminate the need for new grid capacity investments, particularly to avoid cost of investing in new power plants, transmission and distribution lines, and other forms of electricity infrastructure. Furthermore, community solar developers will pay, as I said, for interconnection upgrades and the implementation of this community solar program at the Public Utilities Commission. An additional key benefit of solar electric generation is that by producing more power during the hot sunny days when demand is the highest, with no additional fuel or operating costs, solar generation suppresses higher energy prices during the times of peak demand, reducing the cost of electricity during those key hours. Sometimes called peak shaving or price suppression, this is not a new phenomenon, but it has been seen routinely in markets with higher percentages of renewables. We quantify those savings in economic dispatch study that confirmed adding a significant amount of Pennsylvania solar reduces overall wholesale electricity costs for PA customers. House Bill 531 offers Pennsylvania an important opportunity to allow greater access to solar energy, while also stimulating local jobs and creating new investment for farming communities that are the cornerstone of what makes the Commonwealth so great. Thank you for the opportunity to present some facts on solar electric generation in Pennsylvania.
All right, thank you for your testimony. We're going to open it up for questions now. I would like to ask that questions and answers be brief. We only have about 19 minutes remaining that we can be in this room. I'm going to have the first question. Obviously, the benefits of community solar are obvious. It helps farmers, people that want to be involved with that don't have enough land, they can do it. Having a diversified portfolio of production of generation of electricity is a good thing. The main concern that some folks have with the legislation is normally, when you look at an electric bill, there's the charge on there for the cost of energy, then there's the charge for the distribution, and then there's a charge for the transmission. Those distribution charges and transmission charges, that's what maintains our electric grid. All the poles, the lines, the substations. The way this legislation is written, the community solar folks would get the full retail price of the electricity, and nothing would be contributed towards helping to maintain the grid. So that's the main stumbling block with the legislation. Would any of the three testifiers want to address that issue briefly?
I'm Leslie Elder, the Mid-Atlantic Director for CCSA. There are multiple ways that you can facilitate the starting of a community solar market. Utilizing net metering, which is House Bill 531 as written, is one of the many ways. There are other ways that can also be utilized that Representative Coffer has been working towards through the many stakeholder meetings, and Lauren actually referred to a couple of them. So the smart inverter, which was actually created by ComEd, and it's a sister company of PICO, is interested in developing a smart inverter program. They did this in Illinois. That actually provides the utilities a regulatory asset in order for them to be able to do a lot of those things that you're actually addressing. There's also the value stack, which is a way for the state of Pennsylvania, in order to be able to granularly look at the benefits of what needs to happen in order to maintain a community solar market. The one thing that I would say on this is that in order to make sure that we get that correct, it does take time and a significant amount of analysis from the PUC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is going to be Representative Schwoyer is asking a question. I believe it's on behalf of Chairman Matzey.
I'm going to ask two questions, and I believe both of them are on behalf of Chairman Matzey, and if not, I'm sure Rob has no problem telling me that I didn't. First question, would the coalition be okay if the PUC would have a licensing component like they do with other generation? You're nodding your head yes, so you're fine with the PUC licensing. Okay. And my second question, and thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity. I should have started with that. The Consumer Advocate, in their written testimony that they provided us, was asking specifically about a 2 megawatt cap per development site. Could you expand just a little bit on the size of, you talked about a rough generation to get to that $2 billion of economic development. You talked about a 1.5 gigawatt of development.
Sure.
So how big are each one of these sites? And if the consumer advocate suggested a 2 megawatt cap per site, how would that impact your development, your industry?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So specifically, the legislation at this moment in time has a limit of a 5 megawatt cap. The big thing on this is that it's economies of scale. So the ability to build distributed generation, which still needs to be a small facility to be specific, up to that 5 megawatts actually lowers the cost of the market as a whole in order to be able to ensure that we can actually pass on more savings to our customers itself.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, thank you. Our next question is, and everybody please be brief, Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question comes, I was texting back and forth with farmers and other individuals interested in community solar. One of the roadblocks that some of our farmers are experiencing is that depending on programs they may be participating now, they're not allowed to do solar. They can do gas, but they're not allowed to harvest the sun as the third testifier, even though they could still do bees, sheep, goats. Is that, I know that's not in here, but how do we address that issue? And then can you touch on best payment practices? We've had some stumbling blocks with natural gas percentage payments that landowners learned after the fact. How will payments be instituted consistently for farmers and others?
So I'll answer part of it, and then may I defer some of this to Lauren, who actually does the contracts itself. So as far as, I'm assuming that you're referring to the Clean and Green program as one of the stumbling blocks with farmers. The two things is that this legislation will actually remove the red tape that is preventing farmers from being able to participate in development of community solar, which will do a couple of different things. One, they will be able to build community solar onto their properties itself, provide the local communities around them cost savings on energy, but they can also subscribe to the community solar facility in order to receive cost savings on their own very large energy burdens. So that is the crux of this legislation itself. As far as clean and green programs go, that is a negotiation that happens within the developers and the landowners, and the developers tend to pay the back taxes in order to be able to make that happen. And we also are committed in order to make sure that we can do any of the other changes that need to happen once this legislation is passed. As far as the land leasing, we are working hand in hand with the Farm Bureau in order to ensure that we are getting common principles around land leasing itself that will be understood by the developers and the Farm Bureau for local farmers in order to ensure that we can avoid some of the problems that have happened in the past with leasing and farmers in particular. But Lauren has been doing this for a very long time and has direct experience, so it might be helpful if she can give you the direct experience on the ground for both clean and green and leases.
Go ahead, Lauren, and briefly, if you may.
Yep, absolutely. Well, a bit more context on how the solar leases typically work. We offer $1 per acre value, which is paid annually over the course of the lease. So that could be 20 to 40 years for individual leases. And almost all companies also have that number at being applied with an escalator. So it's escalating over time. And while we're in lease negotiations with any landowner, we always advise them to seek legal counsel going through that process and make sure that they fully understand all of the lease terms and are very comfortable with them. Again, mentioning what Leslie already stated, but if a parcel is in the Clean and Green program, we will pay those rollback taxes in addition to the other property taxes associated with the project.
All right, thank you. Our next question is Representative Delosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. Part of my question was asked earlier as to the full authorization with the PUC and regulation, and that kind of rolls into my second question, which is in the bill, it stipulates the fact that the PUC will ensure customer participation for each customer class. Obviously, they did a lot of rollouts when it came to shopping and that type of thing, but at this point in time, without that registration or jurisdiction, the benefit is solely the developer. So the state is going to be paying to advertise for the developer to expand. Can you give a little bit of information as to the fact of why a state agency would need to advertise for a private entity?
Yeah, so actually there are multiple levels of people who participate in community solar, and so we have the developers themselves. A lot of them do a lot of their subscriber acquisition in-house, but we also have subscriber acquisition companies that go in and do the advertising and work to find the subscribers. So that would not necessarily be a burden of the PUC as much as we want to make sure that the PUC has the ability to have transparency into the market so customers can actually see who is participating into the community solar program and register with the state.
Right, but the bottom line is still a matter of the PUC is being required to make sure all classes are represented in using community solar. So that's like a mandate on the PUC to make sure that happens.
It's not, well, so no, it's not a mandate on the PUC as from an advertising perspective. It is more of a mandate from a consumer protections perspective. Okay. These are best practices that we've seen in other states in order to ensure that the customers have the confidence within the subscriber acquisition companies and the developers.
And that was a concern with the consumer advocate as well. And one last real quick, the actual cost of one of the parts is that dealing with low income. Do you see the cost of this project and community solar being less than the basic default cost?
Correct, yes.
You do? Okay, thank you.
All right, our next question is Representative Mahaffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, and going back is, we all know that solar produces electricity about 25% of the time. What is and what will facilitate if we have a year like we did a couple years ago where we didn't have a whole lot of sunny days and we know that we're not producing at night? What is and what happens as far as meeting the demand for your solar community? On the other side of this is, and I want to get this out real quick, is this is a good bill and I'm on it, but my concern is green space too. Mm-hmm. My concern is using farmland that's not usable. I get that. Mm-hmm. Using parking lots, those type of situations is where I'd like to see more solar. But at the end of the day, it's this General Assembly that should be having a full comprehensive talk about all energy. This kind of energy, nuclear energy, gas, oil, coal, everything. That's what we need, a comprehensive plan on that, and that's what this should be part of, because we know that there's problems, as the chairman said from the get-go, and I know that we should be having more of these discussions and reaching out and having more people here. So on that, and the very last thing is, how many square acres does it take per megawatt to production? Go ahead.
All right, thank you for that. I'm going to take your questions one by one, if I may. So for the first question is what happens when the sun doesn't shine or when the wind doesn't blow? There's multiple different things, but I think one of the things that makes community solar a really wonderful choice for Pennsylvania itself is that we are not looking to replace any other forms of energy generation. This specifically works very well with our current energy generation systems because when the sun doesn't shine, these customers are still part of the utilities customer base and are still connected to the grid. Therefore, if the sun doesn't shine and they're not producing actual energy, other energy sources like natural gas can rev up and ensure that those people continue to stay on and the grid is viable. For your second question, I've been following you for a very long time and all of the work that you've been doing on energy, and I think it's incredibly impressive. I will say to that end, we are making investments, as I said said in my testimony, to $3 to $4 million right now in order to secure land and other resources in order to be able to get this market up and running. However, if this doesn't pass in 2020, the sun does shine so in other states. And so, as we said, that there are other states that have community solar programs, this is really the time that we need in order to be able to get that market certainty. Lastly, your question was around acres. It takes about 6 acres depending on a lot of different qualifications, including conservation and setbacks and fencing and so on and so forth. But on average, it's about 6 acres per megawatt.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if I could add to the question, Representative, and I want to echo what Leslie said, appreciate your interest in a state energy plan. I agree with you that that is needed. Our organization advocates for all of the above, and we want renewables to be a part of the other sources of energy that Pennsylvania is well known for. I believe that the community solar bill is going to promote solar projects that are going to integrate well into the existing grid, number one. And number two, when the sun does not shine, let's bear in mind that the next generation solar PV panels that are being installed now actually can generate electricity even on cloudy days. It's one of those things that's not well known, but the technology has really increased in recent years in terms of the viability of a solar system, even on a cloudy day, number one. Number two, through energy storage, we have enabled solar units to be far more viable in terms of the generation of electricity. So if they're generating more electricity than is needed on a given day, a lot of farms right now are coupling those solar installations with lithium-ion batteries. And what we're seeing is that they're actually saving up energy for the nighttime that they're able to use. I had a tour recently of a farm in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where they power their refrigeration equipment to preserve horticultural crops and flowers at night using the battery storage components. And without digressing, I'm happy to say that our organization supports federal legislation that would incentivize even more battery storage to be coupled with solar. And then finally, as far as green space preservation and land preservation is concerned, one of the nice things about solar is that it's a temporary installation. They're not intended to be permanent. So if a farmer has a fallow field, for instance, he or she could certainly put solar on that field. And then if they decided that they needed to plant on that field, it's easily removed, number one. And number two, there's those crops that we've talked about, like soybeans, pollinator-friendly crops, and a number of others that can coexist and actually be grown underneath solar panels. So we are really excited about the opportunities here and the promise of this legislation to help our farms.
Just to kind of put things in perspective, currently about 1/2% of all electricity in Pennsylvania is from solar. So questions about what if the sun's not shining, 99.5% is from other sources. And then also, just to put things in perspective, a typical natural gas power plant might be 500 megawatts. So the comparable land for solar would be about 3,000 acres to produce the electric that one, and some power plants generate 1,000 megawatts. So it's just to kind of keep things in perspective. But our next question is going to be Representative Pickett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're in a time bind. I was interested in the clean and green issue also, and I believe for the gas industry, natural gas industry, we actually had to legislatively carve out that commercial use of that property and make sure that the property tax picture changed. So that was of interest to me also. I am just wondering quickly, where do our rural electric companies stand on this?
So conversations with the electrics have happened. I know that the rural electrics are moving in a direction of trying to diversify their energy generation. I cannot speak to where they actually are on the community solar bill, although Representative Coffer may have a greater update on that.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the last question. Just for the record, I usually alternate between Republican members and Democrat members asking questions, and we didn't have a lot of Democratic questions today. We are going to be having a future hearing on Representative Magorski's legislation, House Bill 1970, which also deals with solar energy. So that announcement will be coming at a future date. I would like to thank all the members and all the testifiers who came today. And any of the members, we're always happy to talk about this issue as well as any others. And I would like to commend Representative Coffer for working really hard in this issue. And probably the main thing that most of us can relate to in this legislation is how it would help our farmers. As some farmer might be thinking about closing the farm, but they can lease some of their land, and this keeps the farm open, preserves our food supply. You know, that's a good thing, obviously. And all legislation gets amended along the way. Usually what happens is legislation gets amended to the point of where there's enough support for it to pass. If it doesn't get amended, it doesn't pass. That's usually just how it works. Representative Schwoyer and/or Representative Matzey, would you have any closing comments that you would like to make?
No, sir.
Chairman Matzey?
No, thank you again for having the hearing, and I jokingly texted my good friend from Dauphin, Representative Mahaffey, for using my line that both he and I have used many times over the course of this session. We're for an all-energy policy discussion, and this just falls right in line with it. So I appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to future discussion.
All right, thank you. Representative Coffer, any final comments that last about a minute or less?
Waving off.
Okay, he waves off. Well, thank you, everybody. We're up on the floor in a couple minutes, so this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you.